shoot, and froze, are you still frozen to death? You warmed up a little bit. No, no. We're still chilly.
I just told Jeff Saturday, it's cold in here. I can feel the air on my neck. I think it's,
That was something that my first husband couldn't stand. If he had cold air in his neck, it would give him a headache almost immediately. So we had to be really careful when we sat in church because of things.
I have moved around in churches I've been to. We have finally found a spot. It's not too cold. And
That's such a spot.
yeah, but I always bring sweaters and, shawls and stuff. I got a shawl in the car. I'm not bringing it here.
Yeah, because, you know, in the house, I don't know what day it was, I had on this blue quarter, like pants, thin, some of it. And my legs were really they felt bad, you know, I was so cold. So I went to my heavy
Very well.
Yeah, hanging in there.
Good time? We already had our visit.
My sister-in-law, when we got she, would hold the top sheet, undo the top sheet and gone. They couldn't stand it.
Listen, I'm gonna use the last two pictures of that handkerchief.
But I like it because I only want to come.
Morning, y'all. Hey, Leanne, how you doing?
I'm in there now.
Got your lectern out here.
Well, thank you, appreciate it. I'll get everything set up on it now.
Not to be Johnny come lately. Talk to Rusty about on the times that you were gone.
Yeah, he's supposed to.
He's got everything covered.
take.
That way I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, he's
I
supposed to,
appreciate you
he's
guys
supposed to,
doing
he's supposed to take it, 2 Sundays from now. We'll be here next Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah, well, he's gone.
While he's
Of
gone.
course, he doesn't teach the class when he's.
Right,
gone.
right, right.
And Jim was telling me somebody's got his Wednesday night class covered.
Yes, yes,
So,
yeah,
on
yeah.
that.
Actually, that Wednesday night class, he's gone. Garrett Gordy.
Yeah, we won't be here.
Well, you won't be here. Yeah, he's gonna tell us about his missionary school.
Right, we'll be leaving a week from Monday.
Okay.
And then we'll be back the Wednesday or the following week. Yeah, we're up there, we get up there on Tuesday and then we'll leave next Tuesday, so we'll be up there a week.
Okay, good deal. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, well,
Bouncing
my
off each
son,
other like that.
my son volunteered me to teach the adult auditorium class
really?
this Sunday morning that we're there.
Oh,
Their
okay.
teacher's gonna be out of town.
Oh, yeah.
So I've been working on something for
Yeah,
that.
hey, Dad, you mind?
Yeah.
While you're here, right?
I said a good guy, Frank. I said he's a good guy. Now I done backed Jim into a corner, he's got to agree. Were they good? Well, we went and saw him over
It's time to begin our Bible class hour. We'll have some announcements at the beginning of our worship service, but for now we're going to get ready to go to our classes. As soon as everybody gets kind of settled, we'll have a prayer. Let us pray. Our Father in heaven, we thank you so much for this Lord's Day. We thank you so much for the opportunity we have to come and to worship thee, to study from your word. We ask that you be with us during this Bible study hour. Be with the teachers, that they can recall the things that they have prepared. Father, we just thank you for all you do for us. We thank you for your son, Jesus, and it's in his name we pray. Amen. We can now go to class.
Good morning, everyone. While we're having the exodus of the ladies, you can be turning to Deuteronomy chapter 22. Deuteronomy chapter 22. We'll be picking up this morning in verse 9. Okay, someone read verses 9 through 11 for us, please. Deuteronomy 22. Not everybody at once, please.
You shall not sow your vineyard with two kinds of seed, lest the whole yield be forfeited. The crop that you have sown and the yield of the vineyard. You shall not plow with an ox and a donkey together. You shall not wear cloth of wool and linen mixed together.
Okay, remember now we're studying the book of Deuteronomy, which is what Moses is speaking to the children of Israel before they're getting ready to cross over and begin their conquest of the land of Canaan. And we've seen that most of the things that Moses is bringing up to remind them of from the law have to do with things that would help them to be able to live successfully, get along with each other, and be God's people in the land of Canaan. And then we get to this paragraph. And this has thrown some scholars for a loop here as they try to come up with explanations for these prohibitions that Moses makes against mixing seeds in a vineyard or using different type of animals together to plow or to mixing fabrics within clothing. And some ideas that have been advanced to explain what Moses is talking about here. One of the more common is that they're saying it has to do with Canaanite practices. Remember how many times has Moses told the Israelites, don't be like the Canaanites? Over and over again, we've seen that, primarily in religious things. And so they say that for the Israelites to maintain their distinctiveness, then they need not do these things because they were practices of the Canaanites. Now, it's certainly true that the Israelites needed to be distinctive from the Canaanites. That's taught over and over again. However, there is very scant evidence at all that the Canaanites practice these mixings of seeds and animals and fabrics in making clothes. There just isn't a lot of evidence that this has anything to do with what the Canaanites were practicing. Others have advanced an explanation for this, basically saying that these prohibitions are there for practical reasons, that there is a good reason why they shouldn't do these things. For example, two different types of seeds may compete with each other when they are sown together, thus damaging the total yield of the crop. Remember Jesus' parable about the wheat and the tares? And the tares being there, a different type of seed would damage the yield of the crop. If you've ever had a garden, if you let weeds grow in the garden, does it damage your yield? Absolutely. Yeah, there's some truth to that, perhaps. They also say that there's a practical reason for not plowing with an ox and a donkey, and because the animals are of unequal strength. Which one would be stronger? The ox definitely would be stronger, and they say that if you use animals of unequal strength in plowing, the weaker animal could be harmed, could be injured, could be damaged in doing that. And their practical reason for not using two different fabrics in garments is that if you have a garment that's a mixture of wool and linen, it would actually be of inferior quality because they say of the different rates of shrinkage and of durability. Half of your garment's going to shrink at one rate, the other half's going to shrink at another rate, and it's just not going to be very practical. Now, when I look at these, some of those things may actually be true. I don't know whether they really are or not, but to a certain extent, they do make sense, and they may indeed be true. It seems, however, there's a better explanation for what is being taught here in the book of Deuteronomy, that these prohibitions against mixing seeds, against mixing animals, against mixing fabrics, that these are reminders to Israel that mixing together things that are different is not wise. And what the actual intent of this teaching is that they should not mix their religious beliefs. The Israelites' religious beliefs came from where? From God. They're of divine origin. And they should not mix those together with practices, beliefs and practices that came from the Canaanites or any other heathen people. And that basically what we're having here is a prohibition of certain things as a reminder of what they should be doing or not doing in this case, of mixing their religion with the pagan religion. Now, this type of mixing together of religious beliefs and practices, divine and human origin, is given the fancy name of syncretism. So if you're ever reading and you see the word syncretism, it just has to do with the blending or mixing together of divine instructions with human instructions. And syncretism is never good in the scriptures. Actually, one of the best examples of the idea of mixing together divine religious instruction and practices with those of human origin is exemplified by Jeroboam. You remember Jeroboam was the first king of the northern kingdom. After Solomon's death, the kingdom, United Kingdom, divided into two parts. Jeroboam took the 10 tribes of the north and started the northern kingdom of Israel. The 2 tribes in the south became known as Judah. Jerusalem was in which one of those 2 kingdoms? It was in Judah. Jerusalem was there, which meant that the temple was there in the southern kingdom. Now, we see that Jeroboam begins to think to himself, if the people of this new northern kingdom, if people still return to Jerusalem all the times of the year to worship God at the temple, that's not going to be good for me. Pretty soon, they're going to want to reunite with the people of the South, and I'll be out of a job and may even be killed. So he decides that he's going to do something. What does he do? Okay, he sets up 2 golden calves. He sets up one at the northern part of his kingdom in Dan, and another in the southern part of the kingdom in Bethel. Okay, these 2 golden calves that he has set up, he then presents to the people of his kingdom as not as idols, not as representing Baal or any of the other false gods. He presents them to his people as just an alternate way to worship God. You know, sure, it was all right to go to Jerusalem, to the temple and worship, but that's too much trouble. Now, you've got a place to worship close to home. And I put in 2 places, one in the north and one in the south. You can go, you can worship Jehovah in those places. That is what syncretism is, taking the divine elements about worshiping God and mixing it with things of human origin, like let's use a golden calf as a symbol for God and worship at that place rather than another. Unfortunately, this lesson of not mixing God's religion with human religion was one that Israel failed to learn. And we see that it led to the destruction of the northern kingdom. And did the northern kingdom ever come back into existence after it was captured? No, it didn't. It just completely disappeared. Those 10 tribes, the bulk of them, there were members of the 10 tribes in the southern kingdom too, so the tribes didn't completely die out, but the vast majority of those 10 tribes just disappeared from history because they were taken in captivity and intermarried with other people and lost their distinct identity. And even in the southern kingdom, where the temple was located, they also were taken into Babylonian captivity because they did not resist this idea of mixing things up, mixing the worship with God with elements from man-made and pagan religions. And the southern kingdom also went into the Babylonian captivity. That was about 800 years after Moses had written and spoken these words here in Deuteronomy. So it took a while, but we see that eventually the mixing of religion didn't work out. Unfortunately, the desire to mix God's word with human thinking did not die with Old Testament Israel. And even today, we see it still very much alive. When people want to worship God by human devised means and not by the divinely instructed means. People want to have a church organized by human standards and not by God's divine instructions, and so on. Questions or comments on this? Okay, I said this is sort of a spiritual application here. I think that it's symbolic, and I believe the next verse reinforces that outlook, that these verses about the mixing of seeds had a spiritual or symbolic application, because what is taught in verse number 12. Someone read verse 12 for us, please.
You shall make yourself tassels on the 4 corners of the garment with which you cover yourself.
Okay, I noticed he picked the short one this morning. So yes, okay, here's the command. They are to wear tassels on the corners of their garment. What practical purpose does that serve?
So the other people would know who
Well, it didn't have a practical purpose in the sense of it made the garment better or something like that. It had a symbolic purpose. And yes, that's right. It did have that symbolic purpose that you were talking about. It had no practical purpose. It was a command to do something that was a reminder of a spiritual truth. And the obvious spiritual application of this command, like I say, I think gives weight to a spiritual application to the command before it about the having to do with the mixing of seeds, etc. To really understand what Moses is talking about here concerning these tassels, we would have to turn back to the book of Numbers in chapter 15, where we find this. The Lord, so where did this originate from? From God. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the people of Israel and tell them to make tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and to put a cord of blue on the tassel of each corner. And it shall be a tassel for you to look at and remember all the commandments of the Lord, to do them, not to follow after your own heart and your own eyes." So here in Numbers, Moses, and speaking for God, pretty much gives why there was this requirement. It was to serve as a reminder. I put on my cloak every day and I notice I have tassels at the bottom of it. Oh yes, that reminds me that I need to remember and obey the commandments of God. That's the sole purpose that we're dealing with here, a very spiritual purpose in connection with these tassels. Now we have to ask, has God commanded his people under the new covenant to do something that has no practical purpose, but is solely to remind them of a spiritual truth? Lord's Supper is it serves the exact same purpose that these tassels did, that Moses is talking about here. It has no practical purpose in the sense we do not satisfy our hunger by what we eat of the bread. We do not satisfy our thirst from what we drink of the fruit of the vine. It has a symbolic, a remembrance factor that when we do it, when we see it, when we observe it, partake of it, then we're to remember Jesus and his sacrifice. The exact same thing. Really, the idea of something physical to remember something else that Moses is talking about here with the tassels. Do you know that Jesus, when he was on earth, wore these tassels on his clothing? He did. Not usually pictured that way in the portraits that we have. I almost said photographs, but we don't have any of those. In the portraits and the drawings that are made. And we know that to be true from what we read in Matthew chapter 9. You remember the woman with the issue of blood? She was healed when she touched the fringe of his garment. What's another word for fringe? Tassel. Yeah, that's what she touched. She touched the hem of his garment where the tassels were. And that's where she then was healed. And that also tells us Jesus wore clothes that had what? Had tassels on them. So he was in accordance, he lived in accordance with what Moses had taught all the way back here in Deuteronomy. Questions or comments on this one? Yes, Janice?
When did that change?
It changed because of the moving from the old covenant. See, this is all part of the old covenant. When Jesus, with his death, remember the old covenant was nailed to the cross? It means that all of its provisions were fulfilled. As he said, I came to fulfill the law. When they were fulfilled, they were no longer valid. Now we're under the new covenant. There's nothing in the new covenant that talks about wearing tassels. Our reminder is right here in front of me. that being the Lord's Supper. Any other questions or comments?
In the airports, you'll see a lot of Jewish men with the tassels on.
Yes.
You're at the airports.
And I have no idea what they mean, but I'm sure you probably do.
Here.
Okay, let's move on to the next paragraph. That starts in verse 13. Now, starting here in verse 13 and actually continuing on through the rest of the chapter, we find that Moses is beginning to address some issues related to sexual immorality. And we have to ask ourselves, why would he do that? And I think the reason why, we have always heard in our country that godly families are the foundation of American society. Have you heard that before? Absolutely. And I think it's true. And I think in the same way that godly families would be the foundation of Israel's society as well. And so if they're going to live successful lives within the land of Canaan, then there has to be some attention paid to the family relationships. And they must be solid. They must be without deception on the part of either one of the spouses. And so we're getting in now for the rest of the chapter for Moses to bring up situations relating to husband and wife that might be periods to cause disharmony, disunion within that. Okay, someone read verses 13 through 21 for us, please.
If any man takes a wife, and goes into her, and hates her, and accuses her of misconduct, and brings a bad name upon her, saying, I took this woman, when I came near her, I did not find in her evidence of virginity. Then the father of the young woman and her mother shall take him and bring out the evidence of her virginity to the elders of the city and the gate. And the father of the young woman shall say to the elders, I gave my daughter to this man to marry, and he hates her. And behold, he has accused her of misconduct, saying, I did not find in your daughter evidence of virginity. And yet this is the evidence of my daughter's virginity. And they shall spread the cloak before the elders of the city. Then the elders of that city shall take the man and whip him. And they shall fine him 100 shekels of silver, and give them to the father of the young woman, because he has brought a bad name upon a virgin of Israel. And she shall be his wife. He may not divorce her all his days. But if the thing is true, that evidence of virginity was not found in the young woman, then they shall bring out the young woman to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her to death with stones, because she has done an outrageous thing in Israel by whoring in her father's house. So you shall purge the evil from your midst.
Okay, when we get into these situations, we have to realize that a lot of times things between husband and wives, men and women, come down to he said, she said type of situation. In our own time, we have some scientific tools that can help us determine what the truth is in certain situations. DNA evidence and other things that we have now. In the ancient world, in these types of situations, DNA wasn't of any help whatsoever. They didn't even know what it was. So what God here through Moses is doing in the rest of this chapter, when we're dealing with these ideas and instances of sexual immorality, is trying to set up processes processes to try to determine who's telling the truth and who isn't, and to determine what the truth is. Now, are our legal processes today always 100% accurate? No, they're not. Neither were these processes in ancient Israel. The only way they could have ever been 100% accurate is when a situation came up if God personally intervened and told them what the truth was. And he didn't do that. He set up these processes basically to try to help them, in most cases, determine what the actual truth was. And that's what we're going to see here, and we're going to see in the paragraphs that follow in situations that would involve rape. But at any rate, what happens in this specific situation Moses gives is this. A man takes a woman to be his wife, and after the marriage is consummated, the man regrets marrying her, and he makes an accusation that she was not a virgin when they married. Now, Moses does not elaborate upon the motivation of the man for making this accusation. Perhaps he was convinced that it was true and that he was just doing what truth demanded him to do. Perhaps he had decided, I really don't want to be married after all, and I need to come up with a way to get out of this. That never happens, does it? Perhaps that was a possibility. Another possibility, perhaps he had some sort of financial gain in mind that he could achieve through such an accusation as this. We don't know what his motivation was. It doesn't tell us. But we do have a situation. A man has accused his wife of not being a virgin at their marriage. She, of course, is implied in here, is denying it. How do you tell who's telling the truth? And so basically, what Moses wants to do here is to deflate the problem that this would cause. An accusation such as this, would it disrupt the cohesion of the families involved? Would it disrupt the cohesion of the community? Yes, it's something that needed to be dealt with. How do you deal with it? Well, Moses is going to give the process that they were to go through. The proof that Moses is talking about here that's going to be used in ancient Israel is actually not unlike similar practices that occurred in ancient cultures. And it had to do with the fact that a special cloth would be spread upon the marriage bed, and later that cloth would be given to the parents of the bride. The idea being that if that cloth was spotted with blood, then that would prove that the bride was a virgin. If it were not spotted with blood, then that would prove that she was not on her wedding night. Now, today, we know that this isn't an entirely trustworthy method of determining virginity. And that's especially true in a society such as ours, in which brides are routinely 20-plus years of age. But in the ancient societies like Israel, most of the brides, and I know we find this somewhat repulsive, but most of the brides were in the 12 to 16-year age range in Israel and in most of the ancient cultures. And with that age group, it is a much more remarkably accurate method here. So there is a basis for what is the process that's being made. What Moses is saying is that the matter could be easily resolved. If there was blood on the cloth, the bride had been a virgin and her husband was accusing her falsely. But if there was no blood, then the bride was not a virgin at marriage and had been sexually immoral in her behavior prior to her marriage. Now, the process, once that determination was made, and what the results were. If the bride was found to be a virgin at her marriage, it was the husband who falsely accused her that was seriously punished. He was to be whipped. He would have to pay her father of the bride 100 shekels of silver. How much is 100 shekels of silver? We don't use too many shekels today. Well, just by comparison, later on we read about David buying a piece of ground in Jerusalem that would later become the site of Solomon's temple. So we're talking about a pretty good sized piece of land. David only paid 50 shekels of silver for that land. This is twice that amount. 100 shekels is a lot of money, even though we don't understand by today's standards exactly how much it was, but it was quite a bit of money. And the husband also lost forever his right to divorce his wife. So if the evidence showed that he was accusing her falsely, he paid a pretty severe price for that, both personally in the whipping, financially in the penalty that he would have to pay, and then she'd be his wife for the rest of time. He was no way of getting rid of her then in the future. However, if the bride was found to not have been a virgin, then she was to be executed by stoning. Again, Moses states that the purpose of this law was to purge evil from the land. And that would do so in two ways. Number one, by punishing the evildoer. You get rid of the evildoer who had perpetuated the evil. And secondly, as we've been mentioning, there would be a deterrent effect. If I saw what happened to somebody who did that, then I'm probably not going to want to do that. In order so it won't happen to me. We have to remember here that the real danger in Israel when we're talking about the family structure and living successfully within the land is the idea of deception. You don't want to deal with deception on the part of a husband who falsely accuses his wife. You don't want to deal with deception on the part of a bride who deceives her husband into believing that she was somebody that she was not. Nothing will damage a marriage. Nothing will damage a nation more than deception, because deception destroys what? Trust. And what is the basis of a solid marriage? Trust. What's the basis of a firm and strong nation? Trust that the people have in each other and their leaders. And so that trust is needed. And what God is trying to get across here is that there's got to be trust. There cannot be deception. If someone practices deception, they have to pay the price for it. Questions or comments? Yes, Janice.
Why didn't they stone the man for lying?
Well, I don't know. He just didn't. He hadn't. He was deceptive. He had falsely accused her, but he paid a different penalty. You know, he didn't kill, but whipping's no fun. Paying a big fee for somebody is no fun. And we don't know what all was involved in having to live with her for the rest of his life either. If he'd have just accused her of what he'd accused her of, I would imagine it wasn't going to be very pleasant in that home. But okay, I want to get on to the next verse because that's interesting and has a connection with with the New Testament, and that again has to do, as the rest of this chapter does, with sexual immorality. Here's another short verse, short reading, verse 22, please.
If a man is found lying with the wife of another man, both of them shall die. The man who lay with the woman and the woman, so that you shall purge the evil from his.
Now here's where we have a situation where both of them were in this. Okay, what we have here is the idea of adultery, and the fact that adultery would be counter to God's intent that people live successful lives, that there be strong families within Israel. We note here that only the woman is said to be married. The man may or may not have been married, it doesn't say. However, it's still adultery if one of them is married. They don't both have to be married for it to be adultery. And the penalty is given for adultery. What was that? Death of whom? Both the man and the woman. Now, in actuality, in ancient Israel, this penalty was seldom carried out for adultery. And the reason is that the law required before someone could be executed, how many witnesses did they have to be? 2 or 3. At least 2, preferably 3. How many times are there 2 or 3 witnesses to adultery? It's just usually not something that people do in front of other people. So there were very seldom any cases of witnesses unless something happened and people walked in on them, etc. So in effect, the death penalty was seldom given out. This reminds us, of course, of the New Testament situation where a woman was brought to Jesus. That woman had been taken in a what? In adultery. The very act, as they had said. She had been caught in the act. And they brought who to Jesus? Only the woman? Only the woman. They did not bring the man. And now we remember, what did Jesus do? He stooped down and he started writing something on the ground. And oh my goodness, is there speculation on what Jesus was writing on the ground. Juanita said, we don't know. He could have been drawing stick figures. Well, he could, but it does say writing. So a lot of people want to say, well, he must have been writing the sins of all the people that were accusing her to make them realize that they too were sinners. Well, I think they knew they were sinners. I don't know that that would carry any weight necessarily. I'm going to put my speculation here, and I want to label it as speculation, but I think there may be some solid basis for it. I think Jesus may have been writing this very verse. We know one of Jesus' favorite books to use was Deuteronomy. When Satan tempted him 3 times, all 3 times he responded with Scripture. All 3 Scriptures came from what book of the Old Testament? Deuteronomy. It was one of his favorite books. He knew it by heart. Well, he helped to write it, of course, but he knew it. And so I think it's quite possible he could have written this verse. This verse is very clear that the penalty was to be practiced upon the woman and the man. And they had not brought the man. And I think if he did indeed write this verse down, that would have showed her accusers that they were sinning too. And their sin was violating this same very commandment that they were seeking to have her stoned under. And so when Jesus said, let him who is without sin cast the first stone, I don't think he's talking about just somebody who had never sinned, because would that be anybody? No. He's talking about the fact is there's no one here that can cast the first stone because you've broken the same commandment that she has broken. And so you are just as guilty as she is guilty. Now, that may not be true, but I think a good tie-in back to Deuteronomy and Jesus' actions is always has to be considered. The purpose of this punishment for adultery, the fact of the death penalty, again was to remove the evil from the land. And again, it was to purge that and also to serve as that deterrent effect. Okay, questions or comments on this?
I often wonder if one of the accusers was actually the man that.
I don't know how to answer that. I've never wondered that myself, but I can see where you might say that it was a setup and he was involved in the whole thing, because remember, they were doing this to try to trap who? To trap Jesus. So it's possible. We don't really know other than what's there on it, but when I was studying it, I just couldn't help seeing the tie-in to this verse in Deuteronomy, and knowing Jesus' love for the book of Deuteronomy, that it certainly seemed like it's very possibly a connection that's right there. Any other questions or comments? I think we're going to stop there. It's almost a quarter after there. And we're going to get in next week. We'll get into the rest of the book, which are different scenarios having to do with accusations of rape, where are situations involving that. And again, what's the process for determining what the truth is? And instead of getting into the he said, she said type of situation. Thank you very much. Lord willing, we'll pick that up next Sunday.
Roy, if they'd brought the man, they probably wouldn't even brought him in.
Probably not. Well, the whole